Welcome to Catholic Homeschool Radio, where we begin conversations to help parents enrich their lives and make practical decisions for the future.
Priscilla McCaffrey here, and I have as my guest today one of my favorite Franciscans in the world, and that is Sister Mary McCaffrey. Full disclosure, she is my husband Roger McCaffrey's aunt and a family favorite. She has worn many hats, all of them veils, but aside from her many professional accomplishments, we find that she's a wealth of information on the old days, and we love to just sit and talk to her and listen to what she has to say. So it's not completely nostalgic. We really do want the information, what it was like for Catholics back in the day, back in the 30s and the 40s and the early 50s. So that would cover the Depression, World War II, and all sorts of interesting historical moments. So, Sister Mary, thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
So let's get a little of your resume, your degrees and jobs. I promise not to ask you your Social Security number or your weight.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
I don't mind telling my age, but not my weight.
Yeah, well, we're both a good weight for radio. So, you were born in.
I was born in 1930, and I was born in the Bronx, but my parents moved up to Pelham, New York, when I was 5 months old. So I really consider myself a native, since I don't remember what happened the first 5 months.
A native Pelhamite,
yes.
You mean? And for those of our listeners who don't know about Pelham, it's the first suburb outside of New York City?
Well, no, it's really it was a little town when I was growing up between New Rochelle and Mount Vernon.
Okay. And then when did you enter the convent?
I entered the convent when I was 17 in 1947, just after high school.
You were just a child.
A mere child. And
was that normal back then?
Yeah, it was pretty normal. Most of the time, you either were a teacher, a nurse, a secretary, got married, or entered the convent.
Mm-hmm. By at least everyone made a decision, an adult decision by age 18.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
pretty much
phenomenal.
And that's so phenomenal that when I was teaching 17 and 18-year-olds, they were amazed that I even knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
When they find it hard to know where they want to go to college.
I'd like to know a little bit more of the culture that builds up a young person to be able to do that. So, okay, a little bit more about you. Can you tell me your degrees?
My first degree is a BS from Fordham University. My second was an MA in English from Fordham University. And my third was a Master's in Hospital Administration from Columbia University.
Okay, so you've taught and you've worked in hospitals, and you also ran the order for a while.
Yes, I expected to go to St. Francis Hospital for life because they needed a hospital administrator, and they educated me for that. But after I was there for 3 years, I was elected Superior General of our order. Mm-hmm. So I had to come back down to the Mother House and run the community for 2 terms. Mm-hmm. And then I went back into hospitals for a while.
And then how many hospitals does your order have now?
We have none now, but
all right,
there was a time when we had 5.
That's incredible, and that in itself is another story. So let's go back to the culture and the years that made you ready at age 18 to devote the next 68 years of your life to God and His church.
I think that the whole thing is family life, because we were taught to make decisions early. We were supported. We were loved. We became one community as a parish, actually. Our whole social life was in the parish in those days.
Yeah, that's one of the things that interests me, because when you and your brother, my father-in-law, would get together, you'd still talk about your parish and the community. And I knew that it took care of a couple of blocks around St. Catherine's Church. Mm-hmm. And that's not something we have so much today. Some parishes are stronger with their with what they offer the parishioners, but what happens is you're able to be with people who are of like mind. And okay, so why don't you tell me a little bit about some of your earliest memories with the parish? What do they have for little kids?
Okay, they had an organization for every age group in our parish. Mm-hmm. I can remember in second grade belonging to the Angel Society. And then we were in the Junior Children of Mary. And for the boys, it was the Altar Boys and the CYO. And for the girls, it was the Children of Mary. When we were in high school, then we became the Senior Children of Mary. But we also had choir, and that kept us together. When they got to college, after World War II, one of our priests was sent to be a chaplain. And when he came back, he organized a Christian youth apostolate, as different from the Catholic Youth Organization for high school kids. In today's world, you would call it the 2030 Club. And he wanted to get together all these Catholic young men and women. And a lot of them were coming back from the service. In fact, that's where my brother and sister-in-law met.
So this was what they did before there was the computer and online dating. They actually got to cross the threshold and be in the same room.
That's right.
As people who thought the way they did.
Many marriages came from that. Good Catholic marriages. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, my brother went to college when he came home from the service. So he was only 1 year ahead of me then instead of 4. And my sister-in-law had graduated from college, so she ran the Catholic Information Center. Which was
that out of the parish or was that out of the diocese?
No, out of the parish.
Okay, so
it was on 5th Avenue. The parish is on 2nd Avenue.
So what was the Catholic Information Center?
It was almost like a mini library. People could ask questions. They could take out books. They would arrange maybe for priests if they wanted to talk to a priest. They could also be signed up to join in one of the organizations. Now, the organizations didn't stop at 30 years old because the men had the Holy Name Society and the Nocturnal Adoration Society, which my father ran, and the women had the Ladies of Charity, and my mother organized the Mothers Club. So every age group, the younger mothers would go to the Mothers Club when all their kids got out of school. If they didn't have a high school Mothers Club, then they joined the Ladies of Charity. Almost every man in the parish was a Knight of Columbus or in the Holy Name Society.
So they participated in parish life.
That's right.
We thought that only happened after the 60s.
After the 60s. I think it stopped after the 60s.
I know. So, okay, so we still have to go back and let's go to the Angels Club. Was that
the Angel Society? That
is so adorable, and were the little boys angels themselves?
No, the little boys didn't seem to have anything when they were 5, 6, and 7.
Oh, the Angel Society was just the girls. Oh,
yes, that was the girls. And if the boys had something, then I really don't remember. But they also had the Catholic Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and the Brownies and all that. But they were parish oriented. That's where you had your meetings. There was something going on all the time at St. Catherine's, and the nuns and priests were very, very visible.
How many parishioners were there? Could you?
Gee, I couldn't even judge that.
Maybe 1,000 with.
I would think there'd be more than that.
Okay, but it was an average.
I think I must have known 1,000.
Would you say that was an average parish, a typical parish?
Oh, it was the best. You know how on Mother's Day every mother is the best?
Yes.
Well, we had the best parish of the archdiocese.
Okay, I know about parochial pride. So,
well, we did in 1939. We got a new pastor because our elderly pastor had died from sickness, and he happened to work at the cathedral, and he saw that we needed a new school. Now, you won't believe this, but we had one big room for a Catholic school that my brother and I went to, and it was partitioned off by wooden partitions, so that I think I heard third grade work in second, third, and fourth grade, And the only class that was separate was the first grade, and they were up on the stage, so nobody could hear them. And the average class size was 30 or 40.
Oh, my goodness.
We hadn't reached the 50s and 60s when I started teaching. That's what it was. But they learned. I want to tell you, they learned.
Well,
and then Monsignor Hammer came, said, we need a new school. And when he built the new school, he said that when he came in March, and the school was open in September. And then he got a school bus so that the people from Pelham Manor and Pelham Heights could also come to St. Catherine's. Originally, they had gone to public school.
And how many sisters were there at the time? Let's say you had 240 kids in the school?
Oh,
30
easily.
Kids
Easily.
Times eight grades?
Yeah, I would say that, yes. No kindergarten.
Okay. And then, so how many sisters were available?
There were 10 in the convent. One was a cook.
Oh.
And one was the superior. They had to alternate. Canon law made them alternate every 6 years. So the principal of the school was superior also, and then there was another one over in the convent when her term was up, and then they bounced back and forth.
And then what order was that?
Sisters of St. Francis.
Oh, okay. Are not Franciscans?
Well,
not your same order, or
yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Same order.
All right.
The whole title, do you want? The Sisters of St. Francis of the Mission of the Immaculate Virgin, Conventuals of the Third Order.
Okay.
So let's just call us Franciscans.
It's good enough for me. Now you have, I know, a story. It's a beautiful little story about the first one who determined that you were going to be a Franciscan. Can you tell us that story? I love it. And it reflects so much on your mom.
I think I was born in the Franciscans because I was born on April 16th, which is the year that the day that St. Francis established his order, took his vows. Then my parents took me 2.5 weeks later to the Church of St. Francis of Assisi, which was a tiny little Italian church in Sacred Heart Parish in the Bronx, Highbridge. And both families, the McCaffreys and the Watermans, were very good and big families and parishioners of Sacred Heart, and they were active. And so years later, I asked my mother when I had to get my baptismal certificate, why did I go to St. Francis? And everybody else in the family, baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, weddings, funerals, were at Sacred Heart. She said, I don't know. So I think it was God.
Yes, yeah.
And then when we moved up to Pelham, when I was 5 months old, and at 10 months old, I almost died. And my parents were called at 3 a.m. to come and look at me for the last time.
Did you have pneumonia?
I had double pneumonia, no antibiotics in 1931.
Yeah. Right.
I had erysipelas, and I had my mastoids had to be removed. They were infected.
Yeah.
And I was just lying there. And of course they couldn't talk to me, but they wanted them to see me before I died. So my parents went up at 3 a.m, and the next morning,
your poor
my mother went over to the convent. Now, we were new in town because Bud hadn't started school yet. And she rang the doorbell in the convent, and she said, I'm Mrs. McCaffrey. I'm new in town, and I would like you to ask the sisters to pray for my little girl who's dying in New Rochelle Hospital. And she said, I already lost one little girl. So the sister, I learned later, was Sister Simplicia.
Oh,
and she said to my mother, don't you worry, Mrs. McCaffrey. The sisters will pray, and your little girl will be spared to be a Franciscan.
How did she know that?
So my mother, thank God, was smart enough not to tell me that until long after I had my final vows.
Really?
Because, that would have been pressure.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yes, I think that was very wise of her, and I know she loved to chat. So that had to be a very special secret that she kept for a long time. That's beautiful. Okay.
I have a few other stories about...
All right, go ahead. About the Franciscans.
We had all kinds of processions and holy hours and devotions and novenas in St. Catherine's. Now, every year we had 40 hours devotion. And they had this tradition that two 8th grade girls would lead 2 little 3-year-olds. and they would carry a basket of flowers like a flower girl at a wedding. And you were supposed to strew the petals down the aisle. Well, of course, the 3-year-olds had them all gone by half an aisle.
They do clumps.
But anyway, since my mother got friendly with the nuns when I survived, so I knew the nuns and priests very well. And we were at this 40 hours devotion, and I was one of the 2 little 3-year-olds. And we got to the altar where Father Mulry was holding the Blessed Sacrament, waiting for everybody to pass. And I put my basket down, and I curtsied. And at the top of my lungs, I pulled up my dress, and I said, Father Mulry, I got new pants for this. And they have lace on them. And then I put my dress down, picked up my basket, and started in. Needless to say, they never had 3-year-olds again, and my mother cried all the way home. I don't even remember that. My mother tells me that.
She didn't discipline you over that.
Another little 3-year-old story. We lived 3 blocks. Am I talking too much?
No, go ahead.
We lived 3 blocks from church, so when I was in the carriage, at 1.5, 2, my mother would roll me over every day, and we'd make a visit to Jesus. We didn't call it the Blessed Sacrament then, not yet.
Well, was she going to Mass?
No, this was in the afternoon.
Okay.
She didn't start to go to Mass till we started school.
All right.
I mean Mass every day. She went to Mass.
Yeah, no, I know. Daily Mass, yeah.
Yeah. So we would make a visit to Jesus every day, and I learned how to bless myself and to talk to Jesus and all. But we would always find the pastor walking up and down. Now, he was an old man and quite sickly, and his name was Monsignor McNichol. And so my mother taught me to say, "Good afternoon, Monsignor." And one Sunday, my father had me out. We were walking up towards St. Joseph in New Rochelle. That was only 9/10 of a mile from St. Catherine's. A lot of parishes were close. And the priest was coming down to Pelham, to the railroad station. And I see this priest, and I said, "Good afternoon, Monsignor." And the priest said to my father, "You have such an exceptional child. She not only knows I'm a priest, she knows I'm a Monsignor." Well, of course, I didn't know anybody else but a Monsignor. And my father just smiled. He never told the story. He just wanted him to think he had an exceptional child.
An uncanny child.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. I love that. So when you went in the afternoons to the church was open.
Always open.
Now,
I don't know whether it was open 24/7 or whether they locked it at 10 or 11 at night. But it was always open in the morning at 6 when you'd go over for an early Mass. Anytime you'd want to make a visit in the summer weather, we would go over even at night and make a visit if they didn't have any kind of an organized thing.
So that was pretty much the rule for all parishes and all city churches.
Absolutely.
They were always open. And usually when you went in, there was someone else there too, right?
Very seldom was it empty.
And I guess everybody just had this complete sense of safety and security. Nobody was robbing the poor box or...
2nd Avenue, right in the middle of the street, was our playground.
Yeah.
Because once they put up the new school, we didn't have a playground. And we'd go after school. My mother knew I was safe until the 6 o'clock whistle. Very few cars. First of all, World War II and Depression, when I was growing up, people didn't have cars.
Right.
And they certainly, if they drove 45 miles an hour, was fast then. And if they drove by and saw kids playing marbles or Ring-a-Levio or one of those games in the street, they would go very slowly.
Yeah, it was a center for the kids. It was that way when I was growing up too, with our the parish schoolyard. Kids would go up there all the time and play, and they'd have pickup games. And sadly, I don't see that anywhere. In fact, I've been chased off parking lots because of insurance reasons, I think that's that's just a very sad development.
The boys used to play baseball.
Oh, yeah. Where else
Every
would you
day,
go?
my mother would have to pay for a broken window in the school. One day, my brother came home and he broke 2 windows. And my mother said, "In the one game, what's the matter with you?" "Well, no, Ma. Richie and Malin broke the other one, but they're poor." She says, "Why do you think we are, millionaires?"
We're poor now with all these windows. So when you had processions, did you... And 40 hours, why? Can you explain what 40 hours devotion was? Was that
Well, at a high mass on Sunday morning, they would open the 40 hours. And that would open with a procession where every kid in the parish was in it. I mean, the procession took good 10 minutes to get around the church.
Okay, and usually it was inside the church, or did you go outside during the nicer weather?
We had outside processions, but not for that.
Okay.
That was inside the church. It was for adoration. And the Blessed Sacrament was exposed straight through for 40 hours until Tuesday night. They had the closing with another procession. And it was open those 3 days. And every parish in the diocese was assigned a certain 3 days to have their 40 hours.
Okay.
So it was perpetual adoration in the diocese.
Oh, I see.
It was really
That's
beautiful. I mean, I think, if I remember correctly, ours was the second Sunday after Easter.
Oh,
So sometimes it wasn't too warm then. But we did have outdoor processions.
For the Rogation days?
Not for Rogation days, but for Corpus Christi, we had outdoor processions, triple benediction, for May crownings. And St. Catherine's Parish, when I was growing up, was the whole town of Pelham. Now, that included 4 villages, North Pelham, Pelham Manor, Pelham Heights, and Pelham Wood. So there was a wealthy man over in Pelham Manor. His name was Grant, and he owned the 5 and 10. And he was getting elderly, and he donated his home and his acreage to the church. But before then, before they established in 1954 another parish over there, Our Lady of Perpetual Help, that was all St. Catherine's Parish. So it had acres of apple orchards and all. We always had our Corpus Christi processions there.
Oh, beautiful.
And they had 3 altars set up in the orchard, and you'd go to each one and have benediction at each one. And
they were beautifully set up, right?
Beautiful.
That was one of my memories from days in the 60s. And we didn't have a lovely apple orchard, but we had the grounds of the parish, and they were really beautiful. And the altars were just magnificently set up outside. It was glorious.
And when I was growing up, we had 5 full-time priests in the parish.
Oh, my gosh.
And so it might have been way more than 1,000 people.
Yeah.
I would say more like 2,500, easily. 5 full-time priests. Now, they were each assigned one day and night over at, we called it the chapel, because out of the building, the home, they built a chapel on the first floor. And the rooms upstairs, the priest on duty would sleep up there. And they would have to go over one day a week, and then they had masses on Sunday. We also had a Sunday associate that came every weekend for confessions and mass. He was a teacher at Caldwell College in New Jersey. So we had priests around all the time. They were in the playground. I can remember a kid one day going over to the rectory, ringing the doorbell and asking the housekeeper, could Monsignor Hammer come out and play?
Did he live up to his name?
Oh, yeah. He was a great old man.
Oh, good. Yeah. When would you say most kids would make their first communion back then?
When we made it in first grade.
Okay.
I was 6 when I just turned 6.
So I made it in the 60s, and I was 6. Now they're more like 8, which is fine.
I teach a CCD at Sleepy Hollow. I have 7th grade. I have 3 that are making their first communion. Oh. They're almost unchurched now.
Yeah, it's a different world.
You know, the priests were always in school, too. They'd come in and give a religion lesson.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest problems for vocations is that they're not on young men's radar. They're not on the boys' radar when they're growing up. They just don't see the priests. Yeah. But of course, per capita, we don't have as many priests. We have had a vocation crisis, which is why I like talking about this time when there wasn't a vocation crisis, or if there was, it was where do you put all these vocations? Because there were tons of young men and women going into
there were
religious
tons,
life.
And in the 50s, I entered in 47, but we were overloaded in the 50s before Vatican II.
Yeah.
And they built larger Catholic schools and larger novitiates so that they were on our hands at the end of the 60s.
And which was a problem.
And then confirmation, I made that at 7. I know we were well prepared, but personally, right now, I think that was too early because I don't remember from my childhood
at
all
age
the
6,
gifts.
you mean?
7. We made that in 2nd grade, but we had to go.
Confirmation.
Confirmation.
Oh, okay.
Confirmation was only every other year. Mm-hmm. So they had 2 grades.
Yeah.
Make that. And I don't remember as a youngster the implications of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit or the 12 fruits of the Holy Spirit. And I think if I were older, I would remember it, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Well, of course, they are making it older now. Now, how did Catholics feel in a Protestant America? It almost seems as if you had a real Catholic enclave. It wasn't a ghetto. It wasn't a Catholic ghetto. You had many ethnic groups, though probably was mostly Irish Catholic, would you say?
We had more or less a variety, especially when the new school came and we had a school bus and they came from the other villages
on the other side of the tracks.
We were on the poor side of the tracks.
Oh, okay.
They were mostly Irish, Italian. We had one black family, I remember. The girl's name was Prudence.
Oh, adorable.
And my mother was sponsored for her confirmation.
Oh. So how did you feel as a Catholic? Did you think that you were different from other
Well, we were
people
taught that the Catholic religion was the true religion.
Okay.
Founded by Jesus Christ,
So
who was God, and therefore we felt very elite, but we were also taught that we never make fun of anybody else. We had Protestant families, good Protestant families, living on the block of school and church. And their church was a block away on the same block. And we knew we should not go to their services and all, but we were courteous to them. You know?
So you grew up as a confident child, confident with your faith.
But all the students in the school were Catholic. I remember my maybe 3rd year teaching that I got one Protestant girl in my class, and it was unusual.
When you were teaching?
When I was teaching. So
and you
that
were
was in
teaching
the
at
50s.
St. Catherine's?
No.
Oh.
That was in Tuckahoe.
Okay.